Hello. Um, I would like to begin my story with an apology for everything that comes up in it. I would like to apologize to all of society. I am one of those girls who does things that they can't be proud of. And if I did not really need help, I would never tell this story so openly. But I really need your help, or at least your advice. I hope a poll appears at the end of this video like I asked, because now I feel like I'm walking along a narrow, staggering bridge over an abyss, and every wrong step might very well be my last one. I dated my bestie's father. She doesn't know about this, but I'm afraid her mother does. My name is Sheila. I'm 20 years old. I study at a university and I plan to become a journalist. At least I strive for this and hope that my life does not slide completely into hell. And also, I have a best friend. Her name is Rika. She is studying with me and we share a room on campus. By the way, this room is where my story began, and here it will also end. But let me not get ahead of myself. It was one of the usual weekdays. Rika was studying tutorials on eyelash lengthening on YouTube, and I was buried in books preparing for the next test. Then suddenly my mother called. It was strange because it was already pretty late, so I picked up the phone with alarmed anticipation of something bad. And I was right. My mother really wanted to tell me something terrible. She had lost her job and it was a real disaster. You see, I am ashamed to admit it, but I was born into a poor family in a small town in Montana. I was raised by only my mother, and I also have younger brothers. And now my mother and the boys are having to suffer in even worse poverty than I grew up in. For the sake of my future, they save every extra dollar to pay for my next term of education. I come home only a couple of times a year, so I can't really evaluate the problem. But it seems to me that they are even starving because of me. And all this just so I can get a good education and escape from poverty. But please don't get me wrong. I really do everything that I can to be worth the effort my family puts into my future. I'm studying virtually all the time, only taking short breaks for food and sleep. I take the maximum amount of classes every term, meticulously making complicated schedules for myself. It is very important for me. So, my mother knew what kinds of questions I would ask her and assured me that she had already asked for social assistance and that she was absolutely sure that she would find a new job very quickly. My mom promised that I wouldn't have anything to worry about, but of course I could not rely on that. But I had no idea what to do next. I have long been accustomed to limiting myself in literally everything, but I needed money for my studies. My educational projects had to be handed in on time, and they had to be really good to get high grades. So I really needed to lead an active lifestyle, to follow the news and culture and politics, to attend various exhibitions and meetings, and to travel from my campus to nearby cities. All this required money and time. There are only 24 hours in a day, and with this way of life, I could not even think about finding a normal, regular part-time job. I also needed to sleep. I wrote articles for all kinds of dubious internet sites, but they did not pay well, so I was still as poor as a church mouse. I lived without hope for a better life for about a month, and then something happened. My friend Rika invited me to dinner at a restaurant. Of course, she was aware of my situation, so she told me right away that she would cover all the expenses. She just desperately needed my company. That day, Rika's father, Mr. Neal, was supposed to come to town. He had had another argument with his wife, Rika's mother, and needed some moral support. But Rika needed the opportunity to slip away right after dinner without leaving her father alone. She had already planned to go out with a guy she seemed to like, but at the same time, Rika could not say no to her father either. According to her, the atmosphere in her family was really toxic. Rika's parents were experiencing a deep family crisis and had slept in different bedrooms for many years. Well, for me, with my personal poverty crisis, Rika's family problems seemed offensively ridiculous and far-fetched, but still I could not turn my friend down when she needed help. Mr. Neal arrived at the campus several hours earlier than planned, so Rika gave me a guilty face, shrugged, and said that we would have to entertain her old man for almost the entire day. This upset me, but not for long. As soon as Rika introduced me to her father and we had a little conversation, I realized that Mr. Neal was not even close to what I had imagined. According to Rika, he was a typical boomer. But Mr. Neal talked to Rika and me without any superiority. He knew a lot about modern music and cinema, and in general it seemed that there was no subject he was not able to originate a conversation around. Rika tried to pretend that everything was all right, but by the end of the day at the restaurant, she was obviously very annoyed and wanted to slip away and go on her date as soon as possible. I, on the contrary, was having a good time, and for the first time in a month, I was able to relax. Soon, Rika gave us her little performance where she received an urgent text message from her teacher on her smartphone, so that she had to urgently return to campus and run to the lab. When Rika left, Mr. Neal only briefly asked me, "A boyfriend?" I felt silly that he had revealed Rika's plan so easily and only nodded. Then Mr. Neal sighed and said that he did not blame his daughter at all. If someone would have been waiting for him right now, he would also happily run away. After that, Mr. Neal and I talked to each other until we finished our meals. He told me about his unhappy and destructive marriage, and I talked about my difficult situation. I don't know why, but these mutual revelations definitely brought us closer together. After dinner, Mr. Neal and I walked in the nearby park until it was late. Gradually, I began to notice that Rika's father was behaving as if he was courting me. Half jokingly, I told him about it. Then Mr. Neal asked me if it felt weird for me. I quickly assured him that I felt nothing like that at all. And that was true, although at that moment, I did not think of Mr. Neal as a man. He wasn't that old. He was in his mid-40s. He was in good shape, and the gray hair on his temples and in his beard only made him look more handsome. But suddenly Rika's father made a move. He pulled me closer to him and whispered in my ear something that sounded like an offer. The main idea was that if I could, from time to time, spend evenings with him, Mr. Neal would be so grateful that he would help me with my financial difficulties. After that, Rika's father let go of me and said that he did not want to put pressure on me, so he would like to give me some time to think and give him an answer. When I got back to my room, I could not fall asleep. I will put it straight. The idea of turning my friend's father into my sugar daddy seemed pretty tempting to me. Well, why not? Mr. Neal liked me, and I liked him. I really needed money, and he needed the attention of a pretty young girl who could help him to forget the indifference and coldness from his legal wife. It seemed to me like a win-win situation. So, Mr. Neal and I started dating. He visited me several times a week. Of course, I didn't say anything to Rika, and she was so consumed by her new relationship that she did not notice that every other evening I disappeared from campus. She is my best friend, but I'm still not sure how she would perceive my relationship with Mr. Neal. I mean, he was being unfaithful to Rika's mother with me. Although, according to Mr. Neal, everything in his life had only gotten better after we met. A couple of months passed since we started dating, and Mr. Neal had changed noticeably. He became more cheerful, as if something had stopped eating him from the inside. He told me that he had slowly started to put up with his wife, thanks to me. Mr. Neal thought that it was happening because he gave his wife more time to herself, and so as the tension in their relationship began to slowly subside, so did the thoughts of divorce. But I'm not sure that Mr. Neal saw the whole picture. I decided to share this story after a sudden visit from Mrs. Neal to our campus. She came into the room that Rika and I shared. This visit was totally unexpected for Rika, who met her mother and led her to our room, let alone me. Honestly, guys, I was scared to death. For the whole time that Rika and I had gone to the university, I had never seen her mother come visit. Before Mrs. Neal came to campus, I had not thought about her at all. I did not even try to imagine what she looked like. I don't know, maybe this is common for all mistresses? In reality, this woman turned out to be a typical boomer. It even seemed to me that she was older than her husband, or maybe she was just having a bad hair day. Mrs. Neal explained her visit by saying that she simply wanted to see how her girl was doing, and that she wanted to meet her best friend, who Rika talked about so much. I don't know what Rika told her mother about me, but on that day, she literally did not take her tenacious, evaluating eyes off of me. And besides that, she was somehow too intrusive, especially for our first meeting, asking me if I had a boyfriend. I think that Mrs. Neal knows everything. So far, this is the end of my story, and I have no idea what to do next. Should I break up with Mr. Neal? But I need money for my studies. Should I tell everything to Rika or leave everything as it is now? I really need your help and advice. Please don't ignore me, and please vote in the poll for